Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. And again, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. Okay. Migraines have been my companion for 23 years of my life. I can still vividly recall my first migraine. My third grade teacher was making these gingerbread men ornaments for me and my classmates to take home for Christmas. They were made of some kind of plaster or clay, and she used a ton of cinnamon and ginger and allspice to give the ornaments a really festive scent. And I'm sure it smelled nice at first, but I remember thinking after 3 days of the classroom smelling like cinnamon that the classroom reeked. The smell of cinnamon was starting to make me feel sick to my stomach. And I remember that my head was starting to hurt and I was feeling lightheaded and I kept feeling like I needed to cover my eyes. At 32 years old, I can look back and now I know what that was. But as a child, I had no clue what was happening. So I didn't know that it was something that I needed, medical attention for. The next day, I was feeling so off by the end of the day that I couldn't stand up from my desk at the end of class. My mom had to come into the elementary school from her car and help me leave the classroom. And from there, we went straight to my pediatrician. That was the first time I heard the word migraine, and it wouldn't be the last. I left the doctor with the prescription in hand to take on the off chance that I would have another migraine attack. And my 9-year-old mind felt assured that all was well. 5 years later, I found myself sitting in a neurologist's office with two more prescriptions, one for daily medication and one for a triptan to use as an abortive. In those 5 years, the frequency of my migraine attacks worsened from an occasional annoyance to something that disrupted my life on a weekly basis. I took it in stride, though, because I had a goal in mind, and nothing would deter me from reaching it. You see, long before the onset of my headache disorder, I'd already decided how my life would play out. I would graduate from high school at the top of my class, go to an Ivy League college, and from there I would go to medical school. I longed to become a doctor. I wanted to help people. Medicine had always fascinated me, and it still does. The inner workings of the human body and how everything holds itself together in such a delicate and intricate balance, and how science and technology has advanced to the point that human actions can pull someone back from the brink when that balance tips the wrong way. When I was little, I watched my mom live through the disability of a severe spinal cord injury. And it left her in a wheelchair, and a neurosurgeon helped her go from that wheelchair to walking again. And when I saw the impact that had not on only her life, but also on mine, I knew within the core of my being, that is what I want to do. I was such a nerd for all things medicine growing up that for my 8th birthday, my parents gave me an anatomical model of the human brain that I proudly displayed in my bedroom as if it were some kind of trophy. So when it came to my health issues and my migraine attacks, how I could feel myself starting to struggle in school because of the fatigue and the difficulty concentrating through my pain, and how these attacks were becoming much too frequent to be considered an episodic headache disorder, I did what any rational type A personality possessed person would do. I ignored it. I graduated at the very top of my class, valedictorian, even though I missed a full week of school because of a single migraine attack just before my finals. I enrolled at my first choice college with multiple merit-based scholarships and performance awards from my years of playing piano. My migraine attacks continued to increase in frequency and severity, but nothing could get in the way of my dream. That simply wasn't allowed. It wasn't even on the table. I worked towards earning a music major, started taking prerequisite courses for medical school. I volunteered with my college's community's free clinic, performed in piano recitals. I even learned a piano concerto, Beethoven's Third, all while my migraine attacks, fatigue, difficulty concentrating, and other medical issues were building up like water behind a leaking dam. But in my mind, things were looking good. They had to look good. There was no other option. And then the dam burst. When a person, I've not talked about this in a while. When a person wraps their entire identity around their future goals, losing those goals leaves them feeling more than lost. It leaves them feeling like they've been flung out into the universe, somewhere cold and dark and alone with zero gravity, somewhere without an anchor, with no way to reorient themselves. And I felt ashamed because I didn't reach out for help, even though I knew I was struggling. I felt confused because I knew I was capable, yet something was happening to me and to my body that prevented me from utilizing my capabilities to their fullest. And I felt angry because the thing I wanted most, the dream I worked towards for my entire life, was slipping through my fingers, and I couldn't do anything about it. And on top of it all, I was in pain, physical pain that refused to relent. They were ugly feelings, and I didn't want to feel them. So 4 weeks after I left my undergraduate education behind on June 28th, 2010, I decided to do something about those ugly feelings that in my mind would end them permanently. Uh, Thankfully, that didn't work. So after the dust settled, I reevaluated where I was at and what I needed to do, and I came to the following conclusions. 1, I was having severe migraine attacks on a near daily basis. 2, I was extremely depressed because of the worsening pain and disability of my migraine disease. 3, I wasn't equipped to deal with my medical issues. And the most intimidating of all, 4, my doctor wasn't equipped to deal with my medical issues. You would think that the first step would be to find a new doctor, but given the state of my mental health, I decided to start seeing a therapist first. We worked on some things that were going on that I didn't even realize were affecting me, and I developed better coping skills that would help me move forward on this new journey of discovering what the heck was going on. And I want to take a moment here and say something very clearly, something that I wish someone had said to me when I was in the thick of things. It is okay to feel upset. It is okay to feel angry and sad and frustrated and confused. Feeling your feelings is the healthiest thing in the world. Having chronic health issues is not an experience that the faint of heart can endure. I'm sure everyone has heard the expression that it takes fire to forge steel. Think for a moment about the other things that fire can do. Fire can burn. Fire can destroy, can ravage through the things that we know and are familiar with. So yes, a proverbial fire can make us stronger, but it's okay to acknowledge the pain that fire can also bring. I still have days where I lament the things that I can't do. But I've learned that it's okay to do that. It's okay to sit with your feelings. It's the only way to learn how to let them go. If we ignore our feelings, we'll never be able to learn how to cope with them. A life lived with pain and disability can only be made easier if we develop the tools to cope with the feelings that these diseases engender. So, 2 years after I left college, I was finally in a place where I felt that I'd exhausted all of my options with my then neurologist. It was time to move on to someone who specialized in treating headache disorders. And that was not an overnight process. It took about 6 or 7 years, I think, before I met Dr. Rebecca Wells for the first time. There's a feeling that I started to get during those 6, 7 years that I think those of us living with migraine disease, those of us with chronic pain, can relate to, at least at some point. A fear that our pain won't be validated or taken seriously. A fear that drives us to minimize our symptoms, to not ask too many questions. That was something else that I struggled with for a long time. Learning to stand up for myself. Learning how to be my own patient advocate. Learning about the anatomy and the biochemistry behind what's impacting my quality of life. Reading about the medications that my doctor suggested. Informing myself about other options. And speaking up for myself. If a doctor suggested something that I may have questions about or feel uncomfortable with pursuing. having the courage to seek second opinions. Maybe it's my background of wanting to be a doctor myself that helps me to see it this way, but I've always seen a patient-doctor relationship as a 50-50 thing. Those aspects of my health that I'm able to control will only be as good as the amount of work I'm willing to put in. For me, that goes for exercise, diet, mental and emotional well-being. And I also feel like that includes my relationship with my healthcare providers. So those 6 or 7 years I spent trying to find the right doctor, advocating for my own medical needs, they were the equivalent of a medical hell. And even after I finally began seeing Dr. Wells, the process of trying to tame my migraine disease was like trying to tame a wild stallion on a roid rage. I literally cannot count how many times I wound up in the ER for fluids because of nausea and vomiting. I've been hospitalized for rescue DHE at least 8 times because Raskin's protocol requires cardiac monitoring, with each admission requiring a PICC line or some other kind of catheter access, because nearly 2 decades of IV promethazine will eat through your veins like acid. I've had IVs in places I didn't know IVs could go: my shoulder, my collarbone, my ankle, my thumb, my neck. Fun times. So given that most of my free time was spent trying to navigate that kind of life, my 20s were kind of lonely. I mean, a young person going through all of these unique experiences is bound to feel just a little bit awkward when it comes to socializing. How was I supposed to make and keep friends when I'd have to keep canceling on them because I didn't feel well? People got tired of it, got tired of me. So what does a lonely millennial do with her spare time when she's not curled into a fetal position in her bedroom with the blinds closed, desperately trying to endure a migraine attack that feels like a sledgehammer to the back of her head? She does what any other millennial does. She turns to social media. So 4 years into this journey, I discovered Instagram. And there I found a robust community of people my age that were also living with chronic health issues and experiencing the pain and disability of migraine disease. I quickly made an account, made my first post with all of the requisite hashtags, and for the first time in 6 years, I didn't feel alone. My journey continued for a few years after that, but it was easier to endure because I wasn't alone, because I had a community to turn to if I needed support, because I had people that were also turning to me. So inspired by this new form of self-expression, I decided to do something as a form of therapy for myself. Every time I went to the doctor, to the ER, or was admitted to the hospital, I decided that I would take a selfie, a photograph of myself with the biggest smile on my face that I could muster, no matter how I felt, even if I was in horrible pain, even if my nausea hadn't been fully controlled by antiemetics, even if my arms were throbbing from being poked, because I wanted to be able to look back at those photos one day and see them as unequivocal evidence that I was able to survive the most difficult years of my life. All of this reached a breaking point about 3 years ago in an admission for DHE that should have been just 3 days, but turned into 8. And ultimately led to my PICC line developing a blood clot and me with a Hickman catheter in my chest. And for those unfamiliar, Hickman catheter goes into your chest through the jugular vein and it stops at the superior vena cava, like right next to your heart. You'll see patients with like chemo or dialysis with those. So there's me with migraines with a Hickman catheter, and I didn't really have a choice in the matter because I was really dehydrated and I couldn't hold food down, and my labs were starting to kind of show it. I have a lot of photos from that hospital stay, a lot of photos of me smiling, even though I can still see the tears in my eyes because of the panic attack that I had while they were putting that catheter in. I took those photos because I wanted to see that I could maintain strength in the face of adversity. But I remember thinking to myself at multiple points during that inpatient admission, is this all my life is going to be? And then the first CGRP was approved by the FDA. And CGRPs finally allowed Botox and Topamax to work as preventives. And sumatriptan, for the first time, actually effectively treated my migraine attacks. I started to see the frequency and the most severe of my migraine attacks decrease from 28 to 30 a month down to 10. I started to see the severity of my daily pain decrease from an 8 to a 5. And I'm sure someone living without the disability of a migraine disease would think a 5 is horrible. But for me, a 5 on a pain scale opened the door for me to get my life back. I could function with a 5. That hospital stay was 3 years ago, and I haven't been admitted for a migraine since. And that is a personal record, and it's one I'm really proud of. I can finally say that I have hope. And that hope gave me the courage to seek out more answers. And I finally know all of the reasons why college was so difficult for me. I have chronic migraine, psoriatic arthritis, and joint hypermobility disorder. And it took 10 years to finally get the correct diagnoses for everything, but I finally know. And I feel like I can finally breathe. I've come to terms with the fact that I won't be a doctor, that I will always be on the opposite end of that doctor-patient relationship. But I'm grateful for the fact that my interest in medicine allowed me to advocate for myself, afforded me the opportunity to better understand my own medical care. I have doctors that I trust, a support system that I know will always be there for me, and I am continually honing my coping skills that help me process the emotional and mental complexities that accompany a life lived while experiencing the pain and disability that accompanies migraine disease. And I can finally look back at all of those photos, 7 years of selfies taken during the most challenging years of my life. And rather than seeing someone that's hoping to surmount her struggles, I see someone who endured and is still living defiantly. Someone with the strength to survive.
Wow. You are inspiring and fabulous, just fabulous.
Thank you.
And I have to say, your story resonates, I'm sure, with so many of us, and you touched our hearts. So thank you.
No, thank you for the opportunity to share.
Yes, you were wonderful. So we really, really appreciate it. And last thing, can you share your social media in the chat section?
Yeah, I can. I actually haven't been as active on it lately because I'm trying to launch a music thing, but I'll share it in the chat anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Okay.
Figure this out. Okay.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me get a link.
If you want to share it, I think people would love to follow you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Okay, here we go. Copy.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay.
So